Yes, please.
I'm Beth Sullebarger, President of Women's City Club, which strives to educate, empower, and engage concerned citizens to improve the quality of life in our community. It's my great honor tonight to welcome everyone to our virtual event, Filling the Gap: Successful Initiatives in Affordable Housing. This is the first of a two-part series on affordable housing. Our follow-up event will be on Thursday, February 18th, and focus on the pros and cons of a charter amendment for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Before we start, I want to thank our fantastic program committee headed by Jeff Dye for organizing tonight's event. We are very gratified to have over 100 registrants tonight, which shows that the issue of affordable housing is of great concern to the Cincinnati community. Just this week, there was a protest against the Liberty and Elm project, a 300-unit luxury residential project over the Rhine, because it had no component of affordable housing, while poised to get huge subsidies from the city. I'm very glad that council today sent it back to the zoning committee for further consideration. The Housing Our Future strategy, facilitated by the Local Initiative Support Corporation, also known as LISC, and released last May, found that Hamilton County has a deficit of 40,000 housing units affordable for extremely low income households, with incomes of 30% or less of the area median income. The scale of the problem is daunting, and we are grateful to those who constantly work to solve it. Tonight, we will hear from experts in our community who are making a difference. David Siders, Women's City Club's Vice President for Civic Engagement, will now introduce our four esteemed guest speakers and moderate our discussion this evening. Thank you, David.
Of course, we have to kick off with the microphone problem, so forgive me. Thank you, Beth. It's an absolute honor to be with all of you tonight. I'm seeing so many familiar faces working so hard in the community and some new faces. So welcome, everyone. My name is David, and I hold the role of Vice President of Civic Engagement for the Women's City Club, and I'll be moderating our conversation tonight, Filling the Gap: Successful Initiatives in Affordable Housing. As Beth mentioned, the lack of safe, affordable housing is at a crisis point in our community. So it's good news that so many people and organizations are addressing the crisis and undertaking some promising solutions. I'm honored to, first off this evening, introduce Liz Bloom, Executive Director of the Xavier University Community Building Institute, who will present a 20-minute overview of the problems we face together as a community. Liz will illuminate some findings from the work of the Xavier Community Building Institute. Following Liz, we will learn more about successful, inspiring, and safe affordable housing initiatives that have made a vastly meaningful difference to residents and communities. So we welcome Elisa Berry, Executive Director at Cornerstone Renter Equity, Mary Delaney, Executive Director, Community Matters, and sponsor of Lower Price Hill Thrives, and Mary Burke Rivers, Executive Director, Over the Rhine Community Housing. Elisa, Mary Delaney, and Mary Burke Rivers will each have 15 minutes to explain their successful affordable housing projects and how they made them happy, how they made them happen. I think I had a Freudian slip on how happy I will be to hear from them and their inspirational talk this evening. Housekeeping, please mute your microphones while our guests are speaking, and do write your questions in the chat. We've already seen a question that we will have this event recorded on YouTube, and we'll send out that link. And we will be sure to have time for questions and answers tonight. Again, as Beth mentioned, we will present a second forum in February, pros and cons of the proposed charter amendment to fund Cincinnati's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That will be February 18th at 6:30, and we will present more details about the speakers and registration soon. Before we start, quickly, we'd like to thank our co-sponsors, League of Women Voters and Cincinnatus. So without further ado, welcome Liz, who will kick off the evening.
Hi, so happy to be here tonight, and I'm so thrilled that people continue to be interested about this topic and want to get educated. I'm going to share my screen here, if I can. And what I've been asked to do tonight is give everybody a bit of an orientation about housing in general and affordable housing in particular in this region. And I've let me see. There we go. What I thought I would do to get us started is to give you a brief history of housing in Cincinnati. And when I say that, I mean a very brief history. But I think it helps understand the context, because the narrative that we all have about Cincinnati and housing is this is a very affordable housing market. Cincinnati is in the Midwest. We are not Boston. We are not San Francisco. How could we possibly have an affordable housing problem? And what I like to do is say there are very concrete reasons why we find ourselves in this place right now. If you can think back to the Great Depression, when homelessness shocked everyone in the country, the national response was to build public housing. And public housing authorities across the country developed public housing, because what we understood at that time was the market doesn't provide housing for everyone who needs it, particularly for people who don't make a lot of money. And so we built public housing, and it was run by public housing authorities. I don't need to tell you all that white flight decimated urban communities in the 60s and the 70s. We watched populations decline in center cities all over the country, Cincinnati included. And we watched white households leave city neighborhoods and urban neighborhoods and leave them in really declining state, really devalued the housing market. And at that point, I think what communities would say is housing is a private market issue. It's a private market asset. Aside from building public housing, there's really no public response. It's a private market asset. And then I think we realized, as we saw population in all of the neighborhoods that we love and are important to us decline, we realized that we needed to intervene in a different sort of way. And so much of the infrastructure that we have built to respond to urban decay is about attracting the middle class and stabilizing housing markets. CDCs in this community were built to stabilize housing markets in neighborhoods like Price Hill and Avondale and Evanston and on and on. And we got good at this, not stabilizing housing markets and creating middle class housing. And we are now seeing, we are in the middle of an urban revitalization. And I'm using the terms urban revitalization and gentrification in the same line here. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because I think we so often pit the notion that gentrification is a good thing, and that urban revitalization, I mean, it's like we can do only one or the other. And what I want to suggest to you is that's a false choice. We need to be revitalizing urban communities, but we need to be providing for affordable housing at the same time. I mean, if you think about some of our oldest, most historic neighborhoods, like the West End, like Over the Rhine, like Price Hill, like Avondale, these are communities whose housing stock is old and it desperately needs to be reinvested in. And so we need to create tools that allow us to make those kind of reinvestment decisions. What we also know is that the market left to itself is not going to provide enough affordable housing for people who don't make enough money. Period. And that's where gentrification comes in. And so what I would suggest to you is that, well, we've gotten fairly good in the 90s and 2000s figuring out how to stabilize markets and attract people back to urban neighborhoods, because they're wonderful places to live and they have beautiful architecture and they have lovely bones. We've not done a very good job of figuring out how to be intentional about making sure that affordable housing is part of that equation. because it doesn't happen automatically in the market. As we were stabilizing markets and attracting the middle class back to communities, all good things, we were ignoring the need for affordable housing. And you know, I can suggest soon, I've been in Cincinnati a long time working on revitalization, neighborhood planning, all of those sort of things. Something like 7 or 8 years ago, we started to hear people talk about low-income folks having a really hard time finding affordable housing. And of course, we're still looking across geography and saying, but look at all this housing in bad shape. We have plenty of affordable housing. Everything is affordable in these neighborhoods, but that was really a misnomer. We were losing units out of the market in certainly when we hit the recession in 2008 and 9, it just sent all of those trends that were heading in the wrong direction in overdrive. We were losing housing because it was in such bad shape it could no longer be habitable. People were losing their homes who were low-income homeowners. People who were who owned rental property were losing their units because they were overfinanced, and we lost lots and lots and lots of housing out of the market as a result of the recession. So this famous 40,000 unit gap that we talk about is something that was actually identified in 2014, and I would like to tell you today it is worse. I can guarantee you that it is worse. We haven't done the analysis again, but we've absolutely lost more units out of the market in that way. So to the question, how did Cincinnati, a Midwestern affordable community, get where we are? I just felt compelled to sort of put a little bit of history behind that. And what I also want to say to you is that at every step of the way, inequity and racism are driving markets and decision-making. For those of you who know me, I'm a planner, so I have to have a map. This is a map of Hamilton County, and when you look at this map, the areas in red, most of the east side, most of the west side are largely segregated white communities. These communities have less than 3% of the population that's Black. And the rest of the map, just to give you a quick sense, the area in the center, the core, is largely parts of the community where market value acceleration is significant. I didn't say gentrification, but these are areas where we're seeing a lot of market value appreciation. The green areas are areas that have been persistently low income and continue to be. And these areas are getting more desperate as we go on. This sort of center blob, if you will, technical term, in the brown are those communities that have been integrated for a long time. I call it sort of the magic middle of Hamilton County. It's those places where there is affordability, there are good schools, there is racial integration, and these parts of the community are also under stress. And so that's a concern. I just quickly wanted, because I'm a planner and I have to have a couple of maps, to show you what I mean when I say we're losing low-income housing. In areas that are dark red on this map, we are losing affordable units. And in the report in 14, we identified units as units available at less than $750 a month. In some of these areas, the darkest red areas, we're losing hundreds of those units. I want to do just a quick primer for you all on when I say we need more affordable housing, I want to tell you everybody needs affordable housing. What that means is that no household should pay more than 30% of their income on housing. And if you are, and now we're back to this, the Midwest Cincinnati is an affordable housing market. If you have money, it is an affordable housing market. If you don't have money, it's not. What you're looking at here is a chart that shows you that extremely low income households, 100 extremely low income households, very few of them can find an affordable unit that they can afford. If you look at the right side of the chart and you see over median income, most all of those families can find affordable housing. So this is the answer to that question. How does this very reasonably priced market for me and my family suddenly turn into a market that we need affordable units? Because people without money can't afford units in this community. And what we know is that many of those households are households with children, and many of them are senior households. So I want to make a very explicit connection, if I can, between wages and housing. Again, back to this notion of Cincinnati as an affordable housing market. If you make a living wage, if you make a little bit better than a living wage, you have lots of choices. However, the largest segments of our economy, which are growth sectors, nursing, retail sales, labor and materials movers, that's people who work at Amazon, that's people who are delivering your packages, service workers, customer service representatives, none of those jobs pay enough to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati for less than 30% of your income. None of those jobs earn you enough to find a house or an apartment in Cincinnati for less than 30% of your income. And the reason that I talk about 30% of your income, and think about your income. If you're spending upwards of 50 or 60, or in some cases, 80% of your income on your abode, you can't pay for a car, you can't get clothes for the kids, you can't pay for an internet connection, it's really hard to get a computer. The point is, if you spend more than 30% of your income on your housing, you have very little left to do all of the other things that a household needs to do. I didn't say healthcare. So what is the current state of affairs? And as I said, our 40,000 number comes several years ago now. COVID has made everything worse. It's accelerating, I think, the number of foreclosures that we're going to see. It's making it harder for people who are isolated in poor housing to be making good, healthy choices. It's making everything worse. And we have an extreme shortage supply in housing right now. And so that doesn't mean it does mean we're not building enough affordable housing, but what it also means is that there's some real upward price pressure in places like Silverton and Deer Park and Kennedy Heights and Pleasant Ridge and all of those, and Westwood and West Price Hill, all of those neighborhoods that we used to consider relatively affordable markets are becoming less so, because the supply of new construction at all price points has been so truncated, and because we're losing units out of the market that are in such poor condition, that we're losing markets sort of at the high end and at the low end, which is continuing to squeeze the need for affordable housing. We have policies and systems that are designed to respond not to the current issue, but something different. CDCs, tax incentives, all kinds of lending practices are designed to stabilize markets and attract the middle class back to neighborhoods. That's what we have a system designed to do right now, and it is not what we need to do. It's not designed to provide the kind of incentives and supports that affordable housing providers need. And so when Mary talks about a complicated project, every project is complicated because we are always working against systems that are not really designed to do the thing that we need to do now, which is provide more affordable housing. So I want to talk, and Beth in her introduction did some of this, and so I won't do a lot of it because I want to keep on time. It's terrible when the first speaker gets you off time. I want to suggest to you that Housing Our Future is really a phenomenal piece of work. And I say that not because I was on the committee, and lots of people who are on this call were on the committee. It was a coming together of lots and lots of different kinds of housing providers and government agencies and folks who are active in the housing market. And we all sat together for about a year and talked about what we really need to do. And so what I want to tell you is we don't need to, me, who does the studies, we don't need any more studies. We know what to do. We know what the issues are, and now we really need to act. I want to suggest to you that Hamilton County has gotten into this initiative in a very big way, and I certainly appreciate the support that Hamilton County has provided. We are working right now in 6 communities. I mentioned Silverton and Deer Park, in 6 communities in the county to think about how they might provide stabilized housing markets. Again, there we are, and provide affordable housing at the same time. And the county would like to be able to support those initiatives and support those communities who raise their hand and say, we're willing to give this a try. I'll give them to you. Silverton, Deer Park, Addison, Cheviot, Norwood, and Springfield Township. Those communities have all raised their hand and said, we'd like to give this a shot. And I'm tremendously grateful for that. There are proposals right now about tax incentives at the city of Cincinnati. There's a lawsuit alleging discrimination around the current practice of tax abatement for everybody everywhere. There's something called the Roadmap to Equitable Community, which is really focused on trying to create initiatives that will support Black homeowners. And Mary's going to talk, and you're going to hear much more about the Housing Trust Fund Levy campaign. So I won't talk about that today, but these are all active initiatives that are at work now and that we hope will address some of the issues that I just described. And just, it's on the PowerPoint. So if you haven't looked at Housing Our Future, it's a really good comprehensive roadmap of what we need to do. And that's the link to it. It's on LISC's website, and LISC has really sort of rallied the troops for that one. I want to leave with a direct response to the question that people often ask when I do this is, what can we do? What can the people who are listening do? And I want to say a couple of things. I think there are all kinds of things that you can do. And one of them is you can support affordable housing projects in your own communities. Support affordable housing projects in your own communities. I'll tell you, I was reading, and I shouldn't do it. I was reading the comments in the Inquirer yesterday about the reporting on the Liberty and Elm project, and what people say about affordable housing in Over the Rhine or in any other neighborhood is really shocking in a lot of ways. I mean, the racial tropes, all the old sort of saw about why this isn't okay in my neighborhood, and it happens all the time, every day. You know, I think it's easy, and we do it. I apologize to all the elected officials in the audience. It's easy to blame elected officials for not providing enough affordable housing, but it is communities who fight against it all the time. The ugly fights to develop not even affordable housing, just denser housing, which might someday turn affordable, are awful. We need to take a lead in our communities and support these kinds of projects. We also need to support living wage initiatives. Boy, if there were a federal $15 an hour minimum wage, that would be a game changer in the housing market in Cincinnati, because you could buy more house in Cincinnati. You need to lobby candidates, appointed and elected officials, business leaders to support and fund affordable housing initiatives. And you see how hard it is with the conversation that's going on right now on the Liberty and Elm project. And you can engage with local mission-driven CDCs to support their work. You're going to hear from three of them, three wonderful local mission-driven CDCs as soon as I stop talking. And they're going to give you wonderful examples of the work they do, and you need to get engaged with these folks on the ground in their work and support them financially, support them by bringing yourself to the table. And that's what you can do. And that's me for today. And I'm gonna stop talking and let you hear from the three wonderful. I'm so happy to be on a panel with these wonderful women. Gosh, there's a thing, all of us. I'll just saying, just saying. And I'm gonna turn it over now back to Beth. I don't know. I'm gonna stop.
So much, Liz.
Let me stop sharing my screen here. There you go.
Thank you so very much for a great introduction to our evening here, and informative introduction to our evening here. And next we will hear from Elisa Berry, Executive Director at Cornerstone Renter Equity. And please remember to place your questions in the chat. We will make time for an interactive discussion after our speakers tonight. Welcome, Elisa.
Thanks for having me. So honored to be here today and sit on the panel with everybody. So let me see if I'm going to try to share my screen as well. There we go.
Looks good.
All right. So my name is Elisa Berry, and I'm going to be presenting about Cornerstone Renter Equity and our model. Just a quick overview of how this will go. I'll talk about who we are, what we are about, who we serve, where we serve, why we serve, and our services. So the who, what, where, and why. Cornerstone Renter Equity was founded in 2001, and the goal was really to help low-income families in Cincinnati's urban communities achieve financial stability and economic self-sufficiency. We are the only organization of our kind in the city providing affordable housing and an innovative opportunity for families to build assets by investing in themselves and making positive contributions to the community. And so our mission, we are a community-oriented partner providing a customized family-centered approach to asset building and personal growth. We really have our values centered around empowerment, collaboration, growth, equity, and integrity. And our vision is to be the leading model for enabling communities to thrive through empowerment, goal setting, and equitable opportunities. We serve downtown in the Over the Rhine area. And we have an affordable housing project, which is Friars Court. We have 25 units, and we partner with POA, and we also partner with OTRCH, and we partner with them to for their residents to be a part of our Renter Equity Club. And then the membership in the Renter Equity Club, it includes 78 members. And it's about 29 households with children. We do have a lot of seniors and older families in our program. On average, our families are making about $24,000 a year. They're typically in that 30 to 60% of the AMI, and we serve primarily women with children. And so why do we do what we do? We really, our program really looks at an opportunity for low-income renters to have access to equity. And we know that equity is one of the biggest ways that you build wealth in America. It's one of the ways that a big transfer of wealth in America. And we also know that throughout the years that there have been things in place that don't allow us all to have equitable opportunities to access equity. And so we really feel like through this program, we're providing an opportunity for low-income families to build a non-traditional asset that they wouldn't normally have the ability to get to be able to have access to. And so basically, we use a financial empowerment framework to kind of deliver our services, and renter equity is the base of the program of the services that we provide. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about our renter equity program. Our renter equity program is a long-term investment in people and in community. And when I say long-term investment, I say that because when a person enters into the renter equity program, they become a member and they have the opportunity to earn equity, but they earn that equity by investing in themselves, and they also earn that equity by investing in their community. But they earn equity credits, and those equity credits turn into money that they can access after 3 years, because it is a long-term investment in self and in the community. And so the families have the opportunity to invest in themselves and earn $50 a month. And they do that by working with a coach, and that coach just talks to them about goals that they have, and they can work on, like if they're working on home ownership, they'll keep in contact with their coach and let them know, this is what I've done this month to do that, and this month or this month, and then every month that they're investing in themselves, they're earning equity. The other way is that they invest in their community. And so we offer families an opportunity to earn equity by attending a community meeting. We give them 3 opportunities a month to come to community meetings, one of those being the Over the Rhine Community Council, where they can also go to that meeting and earn equity. And then we also ask that they contribute to the community, because we know that the more that you put back into your community, that you're building that community up, and that we hope that when we work together, we're building safe and healthy communities. And so if they're contributing to the community, we have block cleanups, We have block watches, we have gardening clubs, they can volunteer in the community, and then they will earn equity as well. And then if they're paying their rent on time, they also have the opportunity to earn equity for that. And then as a part of just investing in the process and making sure that we're connecting with people, we allow them one time a year to also earn equity by providing us with data. And so the way that kind of breaks down in that equity impact over time is that our members have the opportunity to earn $130 a month in equity. And these are low income families earning 30 to 60% of the AMI. That's a major amount of money for them to be able to earn in savings every month. That comes out to be $1,600 a year. And after 3 years, because it's a long-term investment, they have the opportunity to have $4,800 that they can use a non-traditional asset to turn that into a traditional asset. And so we really look at that as a really great way to helping people really move out of poverty and to really build financial wealth. And just to give an idea of kind of what that looks like for our members right now, we have 78 members. On average, our members have been in the program for about 5 years. And total, overall, they've earned $166,000 on an average of about $2,000 a piece. And then currently they have $75,000 in equity saved. And that's on average about $970 that they have in a savings account, a non-traditional equity account that they can access. And I like to bring that up because they talk about 39% of Americans not even having $400 in their bank account. And our families have $970 on average that they can access. And this next slide that I'll show you will show that they, some of them even have more than that. We have one gentleman who's got up to $5,000 right now in his savings, where he'll be able to use that and turn that over to do some other things as far as building other traditional asset. And then just to share a success story or a client success story, we have a member. And so I think I mentioned earlier that we partner with Over the Rhine Community Housing and other affordable housing projects where we bring our renter equity program to those projects. And then we also have 25 units that we own and operate ourselves. But this particular client story is in conjunction with Over the Rhine Community Housing, where we have we run a renter equity program out of one of their communities. And this member, Kurt, he leads our block cleanups, he takes out the trash. He's a really great just neighbor and a really great member to the program. He had started talking about wanting to switch over to careers. And so as he started talking about that and wanting that, he started to work with our family coach, because they're all assigned to coach as a part of being in the equity program. And that coach was able to help him enroll into trucking school with the assistance of Project Lift. He completed his trucking school. He's got his CDLs, and he's currently he's working for Rumpke. So he's driving the trash truck at Rumpke, and he's looking at now using his equity that he's built with us to start looking for a home in the next year. So I wanted to just share that story with you all. In summary, we're an innovative program that invests in people and community. We provide a unique opportunity for families to build assets, community, and financial health. We serve 78 renter equity households in the Over the Rhine community of Cincinnati. We aim to equip low-income families with non-traditional assets, and we provide a financial empowerment framework to lift families out of poverty and promote long-term financial health and stability. I don't know. I'm done.
Thanks so much, Elisa, for sharing the successes of Kurt and your successful models of Cornerstone Renter Equity. Very much appreciated to hear from you tonight. Next, we'll hear from Mary Delaney, Executive Director of Community Matters and sponsor of Lower Price Hill Thrives. Welcome, Mary.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna also share my screen. Does that look okay? Excellent. So yes, I'm with Community Matters and we're located in Lower Price Hill. And I'm just gonna share a little bit more about just one project in particular to kind of give you a snapshot of what this work looks like on the ground. At least in our community, it looks different in every neighborhood. And just kind of show you kind of the evolution of a grassroots project from kind of a crazy idea to hopefully breaking ground soon. So the project that we are working on is called LPH Thrives, and we're partnering with Over the Rhine Community Housing. And I'll kind of share a little bit about how that structure is taking place. So Lower Price Hill Thrives started off as this vision many years ago when our community was really coming together around, what are some of the big areas of, one, opportunity, and two, kind of the pinch points in our neighborhood. And overwhelmingly, the answer was housing. We have poor housing opportunities, really expensive, landlords that evict really easily, and essentially just creating and perpetuating this unstable environment for our families to live in. And so we started exploring what are the opportunities, and the answer is we've got to tackle and create quality housing that's really centered around keeping neighbors in positive and high quality spaces to live, and also making sure that we have a state really defend against any future displacement. Our neighborhood overall is a lot of folks that have been displaced from other neighborhoods. So people have been displaced and displaced and displaced. And then, it's just this constant moving and shifting. And so our neighbors really wanted to come together and say, let's invest in the people that are actually here and make this happen. So this is kind of the basic overview of what it will entail. It'll be 10 vacant buildings that are currently been blighted for a long time. Of the buildings in Lower Price Hill are vacant, blighted buildings. So you can see the opportunity, but also the challenge. And then we'll be building one new building, and I'll show you some pictures here as we go. This will bring 47 apartments, a whole range of sizes from efficiency to 3 bedrooms so that we can, accommodate families at different sizes. And then affordable housing, it's really, it's kind of tricky, especially in this realm. People kind of talk in these terms all the time. And I mean, when I first got into this, I had to Google just about everything I heard because there's so many acronyms that are thrown out. But the big one that's kind of confusing to understand is what in the world is affordable. And I know Liz really hit on that, so I won't hammer away too much at that. But the units in LPH Thrives are geared toward 30 to 60% of area median income. And my next slide, I'll show you some examples of what in the world that actually means. And then the overall investment's about $12.8 million. Usually when people see that number, they say $12.8 million for 47 units is bananas. And you're right, it is bananas, but it is what it takes to renovate these old buildings and to do it in a way that brings really high quality apartments online. And the last piece on this slide I want to share is that, our piece of this as Community Matters is we didn't have the expertise in how to develop the housing, but we had the expertise in our community. And so we've been organizing for about 5 years and getting residents engaged in this project and really leading it all throughout. And then Over the Rhine Community Housing, they just had this beautiful complementary model. And we just fit so well together. So I'm not 100% sure how we did it, but we convinced them to take a leap of faith and join us. So this is just really quick. I just always like to share this just to contextualize what in the world we're talking about. So, you know, for our families, like a 60% AMI for one wage earner in a household would be about $48,000 a year, or like a $23 an hour wage for a full-time job. So, you know, being able to afford housing, you know, the $15 minimum wage would go a huge way, but that still doesn't even get us to all full affordability. Or another example, you know, we have a lot of jobs in our neighborhood that pay anywhere between $9 and $15 an hour. So that's kind of what we're talking about with the AMI levels. So just really quickly, this is what we're talking about in our neighborhood. These are the buildings. We decided, let's tackle the hardest buildings and make sure that those are a secure base of good quality housing. So this is the rough condition of most of the buildings that we're going to be renovating. So as you can see, there'll be a complete gut rehab. So all the way down to the studs and brought back to life. Many of these, like these, have been vacant for 15 plus years. Internal conditions, a lot of lead contamination, those sort of things. These buildings have, I got a lot of varying answers on how long these have been vacant, so I think that means far too long. And then we'll have one new building. I didn't show you all the buildings, but we'll have one new building primarily so that we can have accessible units and have an elevator and ensure that we have ADA accessibility for our families. This is just a snapshot of what Lower Price Hill historically used to look like. This was 8th Street, if you're familiar with the area. Our building makeup is very similar to Over the Rhine. We have these old, you know, late 1800s Italianate buildings. They're beautiful. We've lost so many of them, but we continue to, you know, have this need. It's just really expensive to renovate overall. So really the idea behind our project is, you know, a grassroots org taking a leap and buying some really terrible buildings and partnering up with organizations to bring the expertise and ideas together. If you've heard of our project, you probably have heard of it recently in our rather public fight for it at City Hall. We had to really fight to get some of the funding, the bit of the bigger chunk of funding to make this happen. There was some weird politics going on. So even when you've done the organizing and you have the most of the funds, there's still this threat. And it's really, I think, what Liz hit on, which is we need all of us advocating together about this issue, not just in Lower Price Hill, but across the city. But your voice can also make a big impact in our neighborhood as well. So, you know, a lot of people came out and spoke on our behalf. We ended up winning that battle, thank goodness. And we should be set to break ground in May on this project. So, you know, 5 years, $12 million, lots of gray hairs on my part and many others. And that's really kind of the energy and the will that's needed to take place to get us to this point. And 47 units might not sound like a ton, but in tackling these 10 buildings in the core kind of area of our community, we'll be reducing the blight by about 75%. So in our little neighborhood, although to the 40,000 units, it's not, you know, we're not solving that big issue, but in our little neighborhood, we're guaranteeing that our community is going to have this high quality base and people will not be displaced from that initial piece. You know, we have the advantage of being a small neighborhood, which is really key. So I'm happy to answer questions later, but that just kind of gives you an overview of this project overall.
Thanks so much, Mary. for your overview of the successful approach of Lower Price Hill Thrives. And I acknowledge the questions and comments that we're seeing in the chat and look forward to a great interactive conversation on what we're hearing and learning tonight. And next off, we have Mary Burke Rivers, Executive Director of Over the Rhine Community Housing. Welcome, Mary. I'm sorry, I don't know if I had my mic off, but it's
No, Mary,
time to welcome Mary Burke Rivers.
Wow, that happened just in the nick of time. My computer shut down. So I just now got back in.
I saw you disappear.
Oh my gosh, I was in
Just in
panic
time.
mode. All right, I gotta take a deep breath.
Take a
All
deep breath.
right, let me see if I can share screen here. That was crazy. Sorry, I missed your presentation, Mary. Okay. Coming. Okay, let me see.
So far, so good.
Okay. So, sorry about that. My name's Mary Burke Rivers. I'm the Executive Director at Over the Rhine Community Housing. And I know we've talked about this a little bit already, but I just wanted to share it again because I don't think we can say it often enough. The challenge in affordable housing is the math doesn't work. So I think each of us had this in our presentation in some form, talking about wages, people's incomes, the housing costs, and that there's just this real disconnect. There's a gap, and you know, it doesn't really matter if it's $100 a month gap or 500. It just doesn't work. If I can afford to pay, if I'm a certified nursing assistant and I make $12.85 an hour, which seems a decent wage, I can only afford $668 a month, and that includes my utilities, because the housing cost includes not only rent, but your utilities, or if you're a homeowner, it's your mortgage, your interest, your all the expenses related to your home is what you should pay no more than 30% of your income for. So if I'm a CNA and I want to find a 1-bedroom in the marketplace, I might have some success, because the range for 1-bedrooms in our area are $643 a month. And I think if some of us who've been out looking at apartments, either with friends or residents, or it's hard to find a decent 1-bedroom for under $750. So as a CNA, you would think I have a good job and I'd be able to find housing in the marketplace, but it would be a struggle. If I'm a preschool teacher, struggle is very similar. If I'm a teacher and I have 2 kids or 1 child and I want a 2-bedroom, I'm not going to be able to find a decent 2-bedroom in the marketplace. And the cashier, similar problems. Bus driver, we think $15 an hour is a good wage, but that's still only $30,000 annually. So that's still going to be a struggle. So it's the math challenge, and part of it is that simple, the math challenge, but then there's other issues like zoning and NIMBYism, people not wanting low-income housing in their community. But the math challenge really has to be addressed. So as far as our organization is concerned, I'm the executive director, and I've been with the organization since 1993. So I've been with our group for a long time, and we've expanded over the years. So this is what our organizational chart looks like now. We have about 45 employees. We have different departments: finance, we develop real estate, we do property management and maintenance, and we do social services. I'm just going to review a little bit about what it was like this past year during COVID. We continued to rent and manage properties. So we have 102 buildings, 472 units, 941 residents were served. We have 15 commercial spaces, which a lot of people probably aren't aware of. Some of our commercial spaces are on Vine Street. So it's a real fine line that we walk to make sure that we're serving the community, but at the same time to take some advantage of the market rents for commercial space so that we can support our mission. So some of our commercial spaces might be familiar to you, like Venice on Vine, a pizza parlor that does job training, the Miami Center for Community Engagement. So students from Miami University of Oxford live in the neighborhood during the urban semester and they take classes at Buddy's Place on the first floor. Spruce used to be one of our tenants, the nail salon, but now we have a place called Zero, I think. But it's a green store that sells products that are good for the environment. So it's a real mix. And then Mortar is our tenant. They do entrepreneur development and we have a pop-up shop. So where their entrepreneurs can test their products in the pop-up shop. Those are some of our commercial spaces and our occupancy rate. Through COVID, we took care of our property. So here's some of our maintenance team. And I think what makes us really unique and special and effective is that we have property management and maintenance in-house, and we have resident services and social workers in-house. And a lot of our maintenance guys, I'm not divulging anything, their anonymity, so I'll go to the next screen, but they are in recovery, a lot of them. So they approach their work from a service perspective that they're giving back to the community. And it's really special to have maintenance folks approach the work in that way. And our maintenance director, Carl, says that it's our property, but it's our residents' home. So when we go in there, to be mindful and respectful that it's someone's home. We do permanent supportive housing also, in addition to our, what we call market rate housing or housing for folks or CNAs or cashiers. We also have housing for folks who've experienced homelessness and some who've experienced chronic addiction and chronic homelessness. And so this is what that group looks like, 359 residents, 42% came from shelter and 58% from street. We have other programs and services. So we have what we call Children's Creative Corner. And that is just a low barrier program for young kids to come in 2 nights a week. This is before COVID, but to come in and get support with homework. They do emotional intelligent work, helping kids to identify their feelings and talk about them instead of acting them out. And then we send them kids to summer camp each summer, Camp Ernst. We didn't get to do that last year because of the COVID. And then one of the big things we do is percentage of income program. If some of you are familiar with, it's a program so that I can pay a percentage of my income for my utility costs, because it's another huge expense for folks and it's really hard for people to keep their utilities on. So we've worked with Community Action Agency to have their reps come to our property so that, and we can help residents collect all the paperwork so that when they have their appointment, they are successful. So last year we got 61 families enrolled in PIP. And then we got creative with COVID. So instead of summer camp, created an ice cream truck out of our van to drive through the neighborhood, chalk art. And then our director of Children's Creative Corner, Emily, put together goodie bags each week for the young kids. We continued with programming with our senior building. So yeah, we have a senior building, 15 units of affordable housing for seniors at 15th and Elm. And here's Angie. She runs our Women of Over the Rhine program, and they're serving as the bingo caller here. Yeah, we did some advocacy. Some of you are familiar with some of it that's been happening recently. We're advocating for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that Liz mentioned. Big supporter of that. I mean, that's just the big piece of the math problem, that good intentions and earnestness just can't address, you know, a gap in what people can afford to pay and what it costs. So we really need other sources of funds and significant sources of funding. And the Housing Trust Fund, which you'll hear about next month, is a way to do that. Liberty and Elm, it's a project of 300 luxury units, and there's no affordable housing in it. So it's, and they're getting a huge tax benefit. So 30-year tax abatement, 30 years. So while property values here and over the Rhine go up and our real estate tax bill goes up dramatically over time, we just got a big increase, and that impacts affordable housing and our ability to provide affordable housing. Their property taxes won't go up for 30 years. So, and I know that's the experience in some other neighborhoods like Evanston, where housing is being developed and it's upscale, and it's lifting the market or lifting the value of homes, which would seem really positive, but the new homes are tax abated, and then the folks who've lived there for a long time on a fixed income, their property taxes go up. So there's just some unfairness there. And then we work with Peasley to try to support their work around equitable development policies. You know, we engaged in some of the marches over the summer. That's one of our maintenance workers, Maurice, who also happens to be the president of the Over the Rhine Community Council. We participated in the census because counting folks and making sure we get those numbers right, as you all know, probably better than me, how important that is to shaping our districts, so that everyone is counted. It has huge impact on a lot of levels. And I can't remember what Amy's doing here. We had something where, you know, we couldn't engage with folks normally, like we normally would. So there was a lot of mailers and flyers and posting signs. We also, at the beginning of 2020, had a ribbon cutting on a project called 821 Flats. And David, feel free to cut me off if it's time to move on. But this was a project that we did in partnership with Tender Mercies. It's 57 units of permanent supportive housing for people who've experienced homelessness and have a mental illness. So you all might be familiar with Tender Mercies. So they had a goal of increasing their number of housing units. And this project is actually in the West End on Ezra Charles Drive. It's a beautiful new building. If you're coming off 75 towards Over the Rhine, you might see it. It's a beautiful building, and you know, it's affordable housing for people who've experienced homelessness, and it looks like upscale housing. We're engaged in a project called Perseverance. It's a rehab project and new construction in the 1500 block of Vine Street, and the mechanism that we use to create affordable housing in this country is called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. It's very complicated, extremely complicated, and it's very competitive. So each state has an allocation of tax credits, and those tax credits that we would get allocated to our project, say, would then be sold to banks, primarily banks and insurance companies who need CRA, and it benefits them. It's a tax credit that they can apply to their taxes each year, but it's very competitive. So there's one round each year to apply for an allocation of tax credits, and it's in February, so it's coming up in a couple of weeks, and about 30% of the projects that apply for funding get that award. And again, it provides an opportunity for banks to invest in affordable housing. So it subsidizes the development side of a project. It doesn't subsidize the operating side, but it provides the capital you need, about maybe 80% of the capital you need to develop a project. You still have to borrow money, and there's other gap financing that you have to apply for. So it's under construction now. It's rehab of these buildings and then infill construction here. And if you drive up Vine Street in the 1500 block, you'll definitely see it. And you know, be good to know that that is affordable housing. And then Mary, I missed it, but I know she talked about Lower Price Hill Thrives. So we're really thrilled, and it's an honor to partner with Community Matters. We love Community Matters. So we're moving this project forward. I think Mary probably mentioned that it'll be closing soon, some pictures of the buildings. We had a scare with it. I don't know if Mary mentioned this, but we got the award of tax credits, which is very competitive. We had applied last year and didn't get it. So we applied again. Well, we applied in 2019, didn't get it, applied in 2020, and we were successful. And then the city funding didn't come through, and it was very suspicious. So one of our council members, PG Sittenfeld, rose to the occasion and advocated, and we were able to get the money ultimately for the project. So it's still very complicated, but it's moving forward. And then Arts Apartments is a project that we're involved in. It's 248 existing affordable housing units in the West End. And there's a picture of it there. Again, it's on Ezra Charles as well. So if you come off of 75 and then you come east into Over the Rhine on Ezra Charles, it's got the colorful awnings on it. So it's privately owned, 248 units, but it was at risk. It was for sale. So a developer out of Indianapolis called Virgin Held acquired the property, and they wanted to apply for tax credits, low-income housing tax credits. So they went to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency in Columbus, and OFA said, well, you need to partner with some local folks who know how to do LIHTC deals in Ohio. So they partnered with us. They're the owner, and we're a co-developer with Virgin Held. And it's a preservation deal. And it's really important because, like I said, it's 248 units that we could have lost given everything that's happening in the West End. But it's interesting, we're getting some pushback from some in the community about the project, even though it's a preservation deal. So affordable housing always has a struggle. Well, most always does. And then we're partnering with Seven Hills Neighborhood Houses, which is the community-based group with deep, deep roots in the West End. And we hope to be able to put together a project with them that we would submit for low-income housing tax credits in 2021. We're working with Peasley Neighborhood Center on this property in Over the Rhine that's owned by the city. It's at the corner of Main and Schiller. I can't remember what the acreage is, but it's a huge lot owned by the city of Cincinnati. And a for-profit developer had proposed to build $500,000 and up single-family homes on the lot several years ago. And the community, mostly parents that we know through Children's Creative Corner, who said, you know what, we're done, we're not going to move anymore, because there's a basketball court on the property, and they were going to displace the basketball court. But we were able to, I guess, stop that development as a community, and now we're trying to strategize on how to approach the city with a plan, a community-based plan that would serve a lot of different markets. Affordable, all affordable, but different ranges. We renovated our service center, and we just moved back several months ago. And I know you all have seen her, Amanda Corman. I just thought I would put this slide in because she was so inspirational. And yeah, I love this part of the poem, which was the end of her poem. If only we're brave enough to see the light, and if only we're brave enough to be it. It's not really related to affordable housing, but we do need that kind of energy to move beyond this crisis that we're in. And that's my presentation.
Thanks so much, Mary, and Over the Rhine Community Housing. A generous round of applause is in order for all of our esteemed guest speakers tonight.
Thank you.
And the drawback of a virtual environment, we had many of our mics on, so I couldn't hear it, but I could feel the applause and energy from all of you. So thank you so much. And we are on time. We have some time for an interactive discussion. How about, I think we'll go to the chat questions as they came in order this evening. And I think it's fair game for any of our guest speakers to answer questions, and our guests can chime in as well. So Danielle, you had a question generally about understanding affordable housing. We've had several perspectives on that. Do you have any more question on that? And also on your follow-up question, keeping affordable housing in good repair. So Danielle.
So my question was really just about developers who have been using the tax credits or the tax abatements saying that they offer affordable housing, but then it's not really affordable. It's usually going to be 80% AMI. I remember that there is a development being built in Madisonville that was 80% AMI. And so like for them, like that's not affordable. And so I think just holding developers accountable. I mean, it's, if they're going to offer housing, I mean, fine, but don't say that it's affordable when it's not. And then I'm also thinking about how to keep from going back to where we've been, like the things that have led to us having such buildings in such disrepair. One of the things being unjust landlords, not and not necessarily large corporations or corporations that, but like maybe just individual landlords, or even like I know there are some corporations that don't invest in maintenance for their buildings, and so just thinking about renter protections. So I guess to be succinct, how to hold developers accountable, how to hold landlords accountable so that we don't end up back where we were.
Yeah, I'll just try to answer a piece of that real quick is because we don't have a mechanism to provide affordable housing, there is a subprime market that is created. I mean, so people, property owners will take advantage of that. So there's a book called Evicted. Matthew Desmond wrote the book, and he embedded himself in a communities in Milwaukee, and he did follow some of the landlords too. So people do have this model of owning properties and renting to folks with low incomes who have no other options. And then they will charge a rent that's not really affordable, or if I have a problem with my car and it breaks down, I can't pay the rent, then I'm evicted. So they just turn the units, and then the neighborhood, depending where it is, say it's in Price Hill, that's experiencing some investment over the years, we'll look at that and call it affordable housing, when in reality it's not. It's this subprime market that was created because people need to live somewhere. So that is a real challenge. And if we call in all the building orders on those properties, or if the tenants do and then those shut down, then where do people end up? They're on the street. And I will say that there are very limited options available today. If you have that level of income, it's extremely hard to find a decent place to live. We have rental subsidy programs for people to live in the broader community, and we cannot find decent housing. Even though we will subsidize the rent, we're not going to pay crazy rents, but you can't find a decent apartment for, $600 a month or $650 for the most part. So that subprime market gets created. We have to create a tool to develop affordable housing or expand existing tools. And then as far as affordable housing, what is it? I always ask, what is the rent? So if you tell me it's affordable to people at 80% AMI, just tell me what the rent is, and then I can figure out if it's affordable or not. So if you say it's affordable to people at 80% and the rent's $1,000, I know now what that means.
So, I want to say a couple of things too about property maintenance. Mary talked about this. There are proposals in Housing Our Future about housing court. We've been talking about housing court for a very long time. It's a delicate balance, as Mary just described, holding property owners accountable for safe sanitary housing, which is what our housing codes require, and not putting people on the street. But there are some very deplorable conditions, and we really need to be holding landlords accountable for the conditions that they're in, and maybe even providing legal counsel. I mean, one of the things that happens when people are evicted is property owners almost always have legal representation, and tenants almost never do. And so having a fair assessment when we get to eviction court is important. But and I'm swimming around here, and I apologize for that. Code enforcement is really important. It's not very sexy, it's not very exciting, but we need folks who can inspect properties, who can respond to complaints, who can respond to complaints appropriately. One of the things that we've said is also things that are as simple as connecting code enforcement officials in suburban communities to each other. Everybody has problem property owners, and but if in any given neighborhood or jurisdiction, I only have 5 units, then a judge is not going to take that seriously. If you can talk about the same property owner who has 100 units across the whole system, then you can get some compliance.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Yvette Henry for Elisa. Is the $4,800 for dollar amount over 3 years? And Yvette, please elaborate if you have more question on that.
Yeah, they the families are able to earn up to $130 a month. There's 4 ways that the families can earn equity. Each way that they can earn equity has its own dollar amount. So you can earn up to $130 a month, up to $1,600 a year, and then that is vested after 3 years, and that is where the $4,800 comes from. If that, I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you, Elisa. Does that answer the question, Yvette? Okay, Jennifer Stevens asks, are there plans to offer programs in other neighborhoods? Jennifer, did you have any more to your question, any other points or parts of your question?
No, and actually Elisa replied to me. And so I was just wondering, and actually it's a good question for all those that presented today. There's many neighborhoods, right, that are experiencing these problems across Cincinnati. And are there plans from any of y'all to look toward other neighborhoods? I know OTR is really needed focus, but I'm just wondering if there's other plans in the future to look at other neighborhoods that are in need as well.
There are lots of community plans that call for community revitalization and affordability. Avondale just passed one. Evanston just passed one. The West End just passed one. As I said, we're working in 6 suburban communities right now. What we need is implementation and funds to implement the proposals that are made. And I'm going to say, I mean, you heard from 3 of the very best CDCs, and I see Kathy is talking about scale. And you hear Mary talk about the complexity of this. Organizations like OTRCH need to be supported so that they can get to scale in the terms of how many units they have and what they can do. This work is not for the faint of heart, and it really takes some expertise to get these projects done at any kind of scale. And we need to be funding the organizations who know how to do this work to do more units.
Thank you, Liz. I think our stop time tonight is 8 o'clock, so we have about 15 minutes left. Just checking in on time and acknowledging a comment from Janet that the city of Cincinnati is spending $8 million to renovate 1 block of Court Street. And she points out that the $8 million is for streetscape, not a building. And then Kurt says, and yet Liberty and Elm says it will cost them $77 million with a question mark. Rhonda, Holyfield Mangieri, what is the most effective strategy for elevating this issue to a larger segment of the population? Affordable housing is a crisis.
I think we all have to be willing to talk about it and willing to be committed and talk about it to our neighbors and to in our own zoning and planning commissions. And we need to be able to, we need to support each other. One of the things we said, I mean, often a developer is the only one standing at the table and everyone else is yelling and screaming. We need to provide moral support for people who are doing this work.
Yeah, I think a big piece that we faced in our fight recently for our project is just there's so much misinformation out there about what affordable housing is and isn't, and just lots of layers of stereotypes that are placed on, you know, who lives in affordable housing. And so it helps us to have that education spread more broadly because, you know, we're small, we advocate as much as we can, but the more there's that elevation of what this is and really the impact community wide, that just really helps bring those conversations forward. I mean, you would think that even there's so much misinformation, even at the policymaker level, like city council members don't understand the basics of what this is and isn't. And so every time one of our organizations has to go, we have to start from this bottom and explain and explain and explain. So there's a big opportunity for how to, if you don't want to jump in the nitty gritty of how in the world to make these projects work, there's some real opportunity that you could take action on how to spread the information and get more advocacy out there.
You're going to hear about the Housing Trust Fund next month, and it's sort of a scary proposal. So some people are afraid of it because it calls for the city to put aside $50 million a year into a housing trust fund, but it doesn't call out what the source should be. So I think we need to spend some time with that ourselves and get comfortable with what we're saying and maybe advocate for it, not maybe, but advocate for that, because that's the level of financing we need unless, we go to $20 an hour minimum wage jobs, because the math just doesn't work if people don't have the income, and it just doesn't work. And you can't, with, like I said it already, good intentions doesn't put a roof over someone's head, and it doesn't address the math problem. So I hope that you'll not immediately be turned off by the dollar level, and just think about, we got to be bold. We have to take bold action. Now's the time. Some of us, Kathy mentioned that it was an issue 24 years ago, and it's just gotten worse. So now's the time for action.
The Cincinnati Action for Housing Now website has so much more information on what we're talking about. So it's an excellent reference point for us to be informed. We have about 9 minutes left, and Beth is asking Mary to explain all the layers of financing required to do rehabs. I know we've heard some examples, and we have a number of questions. I'm thinking out loud that our next session on February 18th will probably dive a little bit deeper into that as we look at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund initiative. And we see, and Mary Burke Rivers acknowledged Kathy Merchant's statement of arriving in Cincinnati 24 years ago and being part of Cincinnati took on affordable housing in a fairly major way, but here we are a quarter century later. Is there a fulcrum point that our presenters would advise to move this particular part of equity forward? Any other thoughts on that? I know we've talked about public awareness.
The thing I would say is, and again, we've done lots of research, lots of study. It isn't that we don't know what to do. We do know what to do. We haven't been able to muster the political will to do it. And that when I say political will, I don't mean just elected officials. I mean community will to do something about this. As I said, look at the comments in the Inquirer yesterday on the article. We in this Zoom room feel compelled to come to this topic, and we feel compelled to have this conversation, but this is not a widespread community issue yet, and it needs to be. And I think all of the things that we're talking about are part of it. Part of what makes this topic hard is there is no one thing, but we know what the things are. We don't have to make this up anymore. We know what it is. We know what the issues are. We need to develop the larger community will to have some impact on this topic.
And I have a thought on that. I think the impact of informing community councils all across the city and then municipal groups across the county is effective. And I've seen some incredible communication in community councils in the last couple of weeks as well. So I think community councils reflect such a wide range of demographics and ways of thinking of folks. And I think talking and communicating, educating, informing community councils, in addition to elected officials and their councils, can work to change hearts and minds and better inform people.
And David, I want to put a point on something that you also said. I think this is not just about the city. It is about the county. It is about the whole region. And I
Yes,
know that's a hard sell, but it is an important part of this equation. There are more poor people living in suburban jurisdictions now than there are in the city of Cincinnati.
thank you, Liz. And yes, I appreciate you pointing that out in your presentation very clearly also. Dot Christensen's asking, is there any opportunity for tiny house projects outside of Over the Rhine similar to Kansas City or Seattle?
I think there's always opportunity. I know that some folks have explored those in our neighborhood as well. It depends on a lot of factors on whether or not it's actually more cost effective. Sometimes they end up being more expensive than you think. I know in our neighborhood in particular, tackling our vacant buildings was really higher priority than that, but it could be a future strategy. It's potential.
We did a tiny house project, sort of. It was through People's Liberty. There was a People's Liberty fellow, Brad Cooper, who wanted to do tiny house and have one be affordable and one be market rate. So we gave him the land to build the tiny houses on, but he couldn't make them affordable because the cost of even a tiny house to build it, the infrastructure, and to build it, it was over $200,000 sale prices. So it was a real learning lesson for him and for us, because we're, I guess, always optimistic that somehow it'll work. But so he did 2 tiny houses on Peach Street and Over the Rhine, and they're really charming, but they're not affordable. But I haven't explored like those larger scale tiny house communities that sometimes I see stories about. We haven't explored it. And yeah, if someone's suggesting it, Over the Rhine's not the right neighborhood for it, probably. But we gave them the land, so that wasn't the expense.
You know, I would love to, I think to answer this question about tiny houses, to get to scale, Mary has said it, 200,000 a unit is crazy expensive, and it's getting more expensive. Materials are more expensive, labor is more expensive. We need to figure out, I'd love to ask if there are some creatives from DAP on the call. We need to be thinking about different kinds of housing models so that we can reduce the per unit expense in ways that are just impossible right now, because it's going to be really hard to get to scale with 20,000 units in 10 years in Cincinnati if we can't figure out how to get the cost out of some of these units.
Janice is asking about how do we end, what can be done to end these tax abatements for McMansions being built?
Well, there's a group addressing it, right?
There are a number of proposals on the table right now. And again, this is a perfect example of an incentive that was built to do something different than we need done right now. It was an incentive. Tax abatements for everybody in every neighborhood was designed to attract middle-class families back to communities, which was a good thing and needed, but we've sort of overshot the mark at this point. And I think if we could be more nuanced with how we're applying tax incentives and incentivize what we want, which is more affordable housing, and maybe still incentivize everybody for everything in neighborhoods where the markets are underperforming, and only incentivize affordable housing where neighborhoods are overperforming the market. In other words, high-end neighborhoods, let's incentivize affordable housing. In lower income neighborhoods, let's continue to incentivize everybody for everything. And in gentrifying neighborhoods, let's make decisions on a case-by-case basis. That's just my thought. I have thought about it.
All right, as we're running short of time here, I encourage everyone to please open up the chat and look at all of the comments and questions. There are some resources mentioned in the chat, and I apologize greatly that we can't go over each one now for the lack of time. How about one final question here, and I apologize for not getting to all of them this evening. Jack is talking about his work at Caracol. One reason having trouble finding housing for clients is because landlords do not accept subsidies and vouchers. Isn't it illegal in the state of Ohio to refuse these kinds of vouchers for units deemed rent reasonable by HUD, with the question, is there any way to enforce this law so more landlords accept vouchers?
There's a law in the books in the city of Cincinnati
Right.
that says you have to accept vouchers as a payment for rent. But I don't think we're enforcing in ways that would make it have real teeth. And there is not a law in the state of Ohio that requires the same thing. In Housing Our Future, that plan, that recommendation is included. Again, we need some political will to make that happen.
Thank you so much. Jeff, is there a way, sorry to put you on the spot, but are we able to save the questions in the chat so we can send those out as a follow-up?
Yes,
And I'm already,
absolutely.
thank you. And I'm seeing Elisa generously shared her email. So I believe it's fair to say that our guest speakers would probably answer your questions via email. Sorry to put us all on the spot here, but I can't thank you all enough, but for the sake of time, it's nearing 8 o'clock. So again, another round of generous applause for our guest speakers tonight, Liz, Elisa, Mary, and Mary. And again, join us
Thanks
next
for
month.
having us.
Absolutely. Thank you to Jeff Day, our Woman City Club program committee chair, who made this possible, along with the executive committee of Woman City Club. And thanks to Beth tonight. Please join us in February, where we will dive deep into learning more about the proposed charter amendment and other resources, and hopefully more answers to the questions you all generated this evening. One final thought. Do you want to continue to be informed, engaged, and empowered to take action about topics such as what we shared tonight? Please consider joining our Woman City Club today. In the past couple of months, we've had events that took a deep dive into the Police Collaborative and the Cincinnati Police Collaborative Refresh, and featured Iris Rowley, the Black United Front, and Al Gerhardstein. We featured Ohio Justice and Policy Center with a discussion on criminal justice reform. And more recently, we had a program exploring how we can keep our drinking water safe, and so much more to come. So thank you again to our speakers tonight and to all of you for being here, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, Mary, thank you so much.